Back home, Sarah struggled with mixed emotions. She was grateful for the police's efforts, but haunted by guilt. She kept asking herself how she had missed the signs, how she had let David into their lives. Therapy helped her face these feelings, but the road to forgiveness was long. Her focus was now on protecting her children and rebuilding their trust. Mark, once silent and withdrawn, began to speak more during counseling. He shared memories of the basement, the fear he felt, and the small moments of bravery he had found to survive. Emily, though younger, slowly opened up about the things that scared her most: the dark, the yelling, and David's angry face. Their stories were heartbreaking, but telling them was a step toward healing. The community, too, played an important role. Neighbors volunteered to help Sarah and the children in practical ways, bringing meals, helping with school runs, or simply offering a kind word. Local organizations reached out with support for families affected by abuse. The tragedy had united the town in a way no one expected, but the danger was not over. One night, Sarah found strange footprints near the back door of her new home. They were fresh and made her blood run cold. She called the police immediately. Officers arrived and searched the area but found no one. The message was clear. David was still watching, waiting for an opportunity. Sarah installed new locks, alarms, and cameras around the house. She changed phone numbers and even moved the children's school to a different district. Every step was taken to create a fortress of safety. Yet the fear lingered. Each shadow in the night seemed to whisper warnings of what could happen if David returned. Meanwhile, the police investigation uncovered even more chilling details. They discovered that David had been involved in an underground network that trafficked children and exploited vulnerable families. His charm was a weapon used to gain trust and access before he controlled and harmed. The network was vast, with members spread across several states. This revelation shocked everyone and added urgency to the manhunt. Authorities launched coordinated operations to dismantle the network. Arrests followed, and new victims came forward. Each testimony revealed more of David's cruelty and the terrifying world he had been part of. The case made headlines nationwide, shining a light on crimes often hidden in the shadows. For Sarah, the public attention was overwhelming. She was grateful that her family's story helped expose such evil, but it also reminded her of the pain and fear they had endured. She became an advocate for abused children, speaking at events and sharing her experience to warn others. Her voice, once broken by fear, grew stronger with every story she told. Mark and Emily's progress continued, but the road ahead was long. Their therapists explained that healing would take years, and that nightmares and fear might always be part of their lives. Sarah held on to hope that with love and support, her children could grow up strong and safe. The community's support, the police's relentless search, and Sarah's courage were all pieces of a complex puzzle. The fight against David and the dark world he represented was far from over, but every day brought new strength to a family determined to survive. As the sun rose each morning, Sarah reminded herself that despite everything, there was still light. The nightmare might never fully disappear, but they were no longer alone in the darkness. The months of searching finally led the police to a remote cabin deep in the woods, miles away from any town or neighbors. It was an old, run-down place, surrounded by thick trees and heavy silence. The detectives approached carefully, knowing David's dangerous nature. They had been chasing him for so long, following countless leads and dead ends. But this tip felt different. It had come from a reliable source who spotted David buying supplies and acting nervously. This could be the moment to end the nightmare. As officers surrounded the cabin, they prepared for a possible confrontation. Inside, David was restless, aware that the walls were closing in. His usual confidence had faded, replaced by a desperate anxiety. He packed hastily, trying to erase any trace of his presence. But the police were faster. With a loud crash, they broke down the door and stormed inside. David didn't resist. The weight of years on the run had worn him down. He was arrested without a struggle and taken into custody. The officers found evidence inside the cabin that linked him directly to his crimes: forged documents, photos of his victims, and items belonging to other missing children. It was a chilling confirmation of the horrors he had committed and the lives he had destroyed. The news spread quickly. For the first time in a long while, Sarah and her children felt a flicker of relief. David was finally caught. The nightmare that had haunted them for so long was coming to an end, but the journey to justice was just beginning. At the police station, David was interrogated. His calm, charming mask had shattered, revealing the dark and cold mind beneath. He denied everything at first, but the overwhelming evidence forced him to confess to many of the crimes. He admitted to abusing Mark and Emily, but shockingly, he also revealed that he had targeted dozens of other families across the country. The scale of his cruelty was unimaginable. The trial was a difficult and emotional process. Sarah had to relive her worst fears in court while protecting her children from further trauma. But the community stood by her, providing support and encouragement. Mark and Emily gave their testimony with bravery that surprised everyone. Their words painted a vivid picture of the suffering they had endured, but also of their strength and hope for the future. David was found guilty on multiple charges, including child abuse, kidnapping, and trafficking. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision was a victory not only for Sarah and her children, but for every victim who had suffered in silence. Even after the trial, the healing process continued. Sarah dedicated herself to helping other families affected by abuse, working with local organizations and law enforcement to raise awareness and prevent future tragedies. Mark and Emily continued therapy, slowly rebuilding their trust in the world and learning to enjoy the simple pleasures of childhood. But the scars left by David would never completely fade. The children faced challenges every day, flashbacks, fears, and struggles with trust. Yet, with their mother's love and the support of their community, they found moments of peace and happiness. The case also inspired changes in law enforcement and social services. Authorities improved training for recognizing signs of abuse and handling such cases with greater care. New policies were introduced to protect vulnerable children better and to track predators like David more effectively. Sarah often reflected on the nightmare they had survived. She knew that David's evil had tested her family in unimaginable ways, but it had also brought them closer together. Their strength and resilience were a testament to the human spirit's ability to endure and heal. As Mark and Emily grew older, they became advocates for children's rights, speaking out against abuse and helping others find their voice. Their story became a beacon of hope, showing that even in the darkest times, light could break through. The community never forgot what had happened, but they chose to remember not just the horror, but the courage and love that had overcome it. Sarah's family, once broken and lost, had found a new beginning. David's capture and conviction closed a terrifying chapter, but it also opened a new one of healing, awareness, and justice. The story of a mother's love, a family's survival, and the relentless pursuit of truth would live on, reminding everyone that evil can be fought and defeated. The nightmare was over. But the fight to protect the innocent and vulnerable would continue forever. Emily stopped speaking almost completely. Mark tried to protect his sister but felt powerless. The children's innocence was slipping away day by day. They were living in constant fear but had no way to ask for help. The adults around them were waiting for signs, but the children had learned to hide their pain. One night, a neighbor heard Emily screaming, high-pitched, desperate cries that cut through the silence. Worried, the neighbor called 911 immediately. When the police arrived, they found the house locked from the outside. No one answered the door. After breaking in, officers discovered a chilling sight: Emily and Mark locked inside a small, dark room in the basement. Their clothes were dirty, and their faces showed fear and exhaustion. They were weak and trembling but alive. David was gone. No one knew where he had disappeared to. The police launched a massive search for him, fearing what he might do next. Emergency medical teams rushed the children to the hospital. Tests revealed injuries far worse than anyone had imagined: broken bones, bruises, cuts, and signs of long-term neglect. Psychologists said the children were deeply traumatized, carrying emotional wounds invisible to the eye. The community was shocked. The friendly man who once fixed fences and smiled at neighbors was now a suspect in a terrible crime. Questions flooded the neighborhood. How could no one see this coming? How did David hide such cruelty behind his charming smile? Sarah was left shattered. She blamed herself for trusting David and failing to protect her children. The police assured her they would do everything to bring David to justice. Meanwhile, social workers helped Sarah and her children start the slow road to healing. The terrifying nightmare that had been hidden behind closed doors was now out in the open. The search for David continued, but the damage was done. For Mark and Emily, life would never be the same again. The police began a thorough investigation of the house the moment they found the children locked in that dark basement room. Every corner was examined carefully. What they uncovered sent chills down their spines. Behind the family's neat and normal appearance was a disturbing maze of hidden horrors. The basement was larger than anyone had thought, with secret doors leading to small rooms no one knew existed. These rooms were dirty and cold, barely big enough to hold a person. Inside one of these secret chambers, officers found old toys covered in dust, empty food wrappers, and blankets stained with dirt. The walls were scratched and marked with desperate messages, possibly from the children or others who might have been trapped there before. It was clear this place had been used for a long time as a prison for the children. Medical experts who treated Mark and Emily revealed a shocking list of injuries: broken ribs that had been ignored, bruises covering almost every inch of their bodies, and scars from burns. Doctors said the children had been starved and kept in near darkness for hours at a time. The emotional damage was even worse. Psychologists described the children as deeply frightened and confused, unable to understand how someone who seemed so kind could hurt them so badly. While Sarah was struggling with guilt and shock, police officers continued searching the house for David, but he was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Neighbors reported seeing him leave the day before, but no one knew where he was headed. The police launched a massive manhunt, sharing his photo and details with law enforcement agencies across the state. As investigators dug deeper into David's past, they discovered a troubling pattern. David wasn't who he claimed to be. He had used several different names and false identities over the years. Each time he moved to a new town, he left behind stories of broken families and missing children. Police found reports from other states, where women had gone missing or where their children had been taken from them under mysterious circumstances shortly after David entered their lives. Records showed that David had been arrested multiple times for assault and fraud, but somehow always managed to avoid serious jail time. His charm and ability to manipulate people had helped him escape justice again and again. Detectives realized that David was not just a dangerous man in Sarah's life. He was a master of deception, a predator who used love and trust as weapons to control and destroy families. The community was stunned. How had no one noticed? How had a man like David been allowed to move freely from place to place, hiding behind fake smiles and false stories? Local news stations began reporting on the case, calling it one of the most disturbing stories in recent memory. People who once admired David now spoke in horror, describing him as a monster hiding in plain sight. Meanwhile, Sarah and her children were placed under protection. Social workers arranged a safe home where they could begin healing without fear. Sarah started therapy to deal with the trauma and the overwhelming guilt she felt for trusting David. She vowed to do everything possible to keep her children safe and to make sure no other family would fall victim to a man like David. Mark and Emily's recovery was slow and painful. They were scared of strangers and loud noises, and they struggled to sleep without nightmares. But with the support of counselors and the love of their mother, they began to find small moments of joy again. They learned to trust again, though the scars of their ordeal would never fully disappear. The police never gave up the search for David. Tips poured in from all over the country, but he was always one step ahead. It seemed he had planned his escape carefully, leaving no trace behind. Authorities believed he had help from others or had prepared new fake identities to start his cycle of abuse somewhere else. As the investigation continued, detectives uncovered even more evidence linking David to crimes against other families. They found hidden phones, fake passports, and cash hidden in secret compartments around the house. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of a man who lived a double life, one of a loving boyfriend to Sarah and her children, and another as a dangerous criminal. For Sarah, the truth was bitter but necessary. She realized she had been blinded by hope and love, unable to see the evil lurking in her home. Her heartbreak turned into determination. She began speaking out about her experience, warning other parents to be careful and to trust their instincts. The case became a powerful lesson in how predators use charm and lies to trap innocent victims. It reminded the community that abuse can hide behind the most ordinary faces, and that listening to warning signs can save lives. Though David remained on the run, the police promised the family that justice would come. For now, the focus was on healing and protecting the children. Sarah's love for her kids became their strongest shield, helping them face a future filled with uncertainty, but also hope. The nightmare was far from over, but the darkness was finally being brought into the light. Months passed since the police found Mark and Emily locked in that cold basement, and life for Sarah and her children had changed forever. The scars left behind were more than just physical. They ran deep in their hearts and minds. Sarah spent every waking moment trying to heal her broken family. Therapy sessions for the children were long and exhausting, but slowly Mark and Emily began to respond. The dark silence that had wrapped around them started to lift, replaced by small signs of hope. Sarah was determined to keep her family safe, but the shadow of David hung over them all. No one knew where he had disappeared to, and that unknown was the most frightening part. Every knock on the door or ring of the phone sent Sarah's heart racing. She feared he might return to finish what he had started. The police had warned her to stay vigilant and report anything suspicious immediately. Meanwhile, detectives in charge of the case had expanded their investigation. They formed a special task force dedicated to tracking David down. He was considered extremely dangerous. His history showed a pattern of violence and manipulation that grew worse over time. Authorities believed he might be hiding somewhere far away, using new identities to avoid capture. But they never stopped searching. One breakthrough came when the task force received a tip from a small town several hundred miles away. A man matching. David's description had been seen buying supplies under a fake name. Police acted quickly and raided a rundown motel where he was believed to be hiding. But when they arrived, the room was empty. Only discarded clothes and a hastily packed bag remained. David had once again slipped through their fingers. This failed capture increased the tension. The manhunt became one of the highest priorities for law enforcement in the region. David's ability to evade arrest raised troubling questions about how many lives he had already destroyed. Detectives reviewed cold cases, searching for links to missing children or abused families with no answers. The picture of David's dark past grew larger and more horrifying with every discovery. Sarah had been through more than most people could imagine. After years of marriage filled with endless arguments and broken promises, she finally found the courage to leave. Alone now, she had 2 children to raise, Mark, a quiet 10-year-old boy, and Emily, a sensitive 6-year-old girl. Life after the divorce was hard. Every day was a struggle to keep the household running, to make sure her children had food, clothing, and a sense of normalcy. But despite the difficulties, Sarah was determined to give them a better life. For months, she threw herself into her work, barely having time to think about her own happiness. Then one day, through an online group for single parents, Sarah met David. He seemed different from the others she had met before. David was polite, attentive, and always ready to listen. At first, Sarah was cautious. She had been hurt too many times and didn't want to put her children in danger. But David was patient. He didn't rush anything. Slowly, Sarah began to trust him. David showed a genuine interest in her children. He bought toys for Emily and helped Mark with his homework. Neighbors saw David fixing things around the house and playing with the kids in the yard. Sarah's friends said she looked happier. For the first time in a long while, Sarah allowed herself to hope that things might finally get better. It was like a fresh start, one she desperately needed. But not everyone was convinced. Jessica, Sarah's sister, visited often. At first, she tried to be supportive and welcome David into the family. Yet during her visits, she noticed things that didn't sit right. The house sometimes smelled odd, like something was burning, or spoiled, but no one talked about it. Emily looked pale and tired, more withdrawn than usual. Mark, who used to be lively and talkative, was quiet and avoided eye contact. One day, Jessica spotted a bruise on Emily's arm, hidden under long sleeves. When she asked Emily about it, the little girl just looked away and whispered something she quickly took back. Jessica wanted to warn Sarah, but every time she tried, Sarah brushed her off. Sarah believed David was a good man, the one person who had offered her peace after so much chaos. She didn't want to hear any negativity. She thought maybe Jessica was just jealous or worried too much. Sarah told herself that if there were problems, the children would tell her. But the truth was, the kids were scared. They didn't want to upset their mother or get David angry. Their home, once a safe place, had become a source of fear. Behind the closed doors, David's kindness was a mask for something far darker. His temper was quick and violent when no one else was around. Small mistakes by the children were met with harsh punishments, sometimes leaving marks and bruises. David controlled everything, the meals, the schedules, even who the children could talk to. Sarah noticed these changes but convinced herself it was just discipline, that David was teaching the children respect. One afternoon, the children's school called. The voice on the other end was serious. Mark had come to school with visible injuries, cuts and bruises on his face and arms. The teachers were worried about his well-being. Sarah's heart raced as she rushed to the school. Seeing Mark so fragile and scared was a shock. She asked what had happened, but Mark was silent, too frightened to speak. The school had already made a report to Child Protective Services, and Sarah knew the police would soon be involved. Jessica felt vindicated, but also terrified. She urged Sarah to reconsider her trust in David. "We need to protect the kids," she said quietly. But Sarah, overwhelmed and afraid of losing her relationship with David, insisted she would handle it. She promised to watch over the children closely. Days passed, but the tension only grew. David became distant and colder, no longer pretending to be the loving partner he once seemed. Neighbors began to hear strange noises at night. Thudding, sounds, muffled cries, and raised voices. Some wondered if something was wrong, but no one dared to intervene. Sarah was exhausted, torn between love and doubt. Her home, once filled with hope, now felt like a prison. One evening, the police arrived at the house. They had received an anonymous tip reporting possible abuse. Sarah opened the door to find officers standing on the porch. Inside, the house looked tidy, but the atmosphere was heavy and tense. The children stayed silent as officers asked questions and looked around. David remained calm and cooperative, answering everything with rehearsed ease. No clear evidence of abuse was found at that moment. The police left, unsure of what to believe. But something had changed. The seed of suspicion was planted. Sarah's neighbors, Jessica, and even Sarah herself, began to see that appearances can be deceiving. Behind the smiles and the quiet family dinners, a secret nightmare was growing. David was not the man Sarah thought she knew. And for the children, the horror was just beginning. After the police visit, the house seemed quieter for a while, but the tension inside grew heavier. Sarah tried harder to keep everything normal for her children, but the fear was now a shadow in the room. Jessica, her sister, visited even more often. She wanted to be sure the children were safe. Each time she came, she watched closely, looking for any signs of trouble that might have been missed before. Jessica noticed that Emily, the youngest, was trembling whenever David came near her. The little girl tried to hide behind her mother or cling to Jessica when she felt scared. Mark, the older boy, was more silent than ever. He stopped playing outside and refused to talk about school or his friends. Their eyes seemed empty, like they were holding secrets too heavy to share. One afternoon, Jessica found Emily crying quietly in her bedroom. When she tried to comfort her, Emily whispered that David scared her. She couldn't explain why, but Jessica could see the fear in her eyes. There were marks on Emily's wrists, faint but clear. Jessica's heart broke. She wanted to do something, but she was also afraid. What if Sarah didn't believe her? What if David hurt the children even more because of her actions? Sarah, meanwhile, was still in denial. She didn't want to admit that the man she had trusted could be hurting her kids. Every time Jessica brought up her concerns, Sarah would get defensive. She loved David and wanted to believe he was good. She told herself the bruises were accidents, the silence was just the children's shyness, and the fear was just imagination. She clung to the hope that things would improve, but deep down, she was scared too. Then came the phone call from the school. The teacher sounded worried, explaining that Mark had arrived with fresh bruises and scratches. The injuries were worse this time, and Mark seemed withdrawn and afraid. The school had already reported the case to Child Protective Services, and they were urging Sarah to get help. The news hit Sarah like a storm. She felt helpless, overwhelmed, and ashamed that she had not seen the signs earlier. Jessica was there to support her. Together, they agreed Sarah had to face the truth and protect her children. They called the police again, this time requesting a thorough investigation. Officers arrived at the house, prepared to do a careful check. But the visit was different from the last time. This time, the police were serious and determined. David, however, seemed calm and collected. He acted like a perfect boyfriend, helpful, polite, and cooperative. He smiled at the officers, answered their questions smoothly, and showed them around the house without hesitation. The children stayed quiet, scared to say anything. Sarah watched, feeling trapped between fear and love. The officers found no visible evidence to arrest David or remove the children. It was a painful reminder that abuse often hides in silence. Despite the police not finding proof that day, the officers did not leave completely convinced. They made notes, talked to neighbors, and promised to keep monitoring the family. The community too was growing uneasy. Rumors spread quietly about strange sounds at night, crying, banging, and whispers of fear coming from Sarah's house. People wondered what was really going on but hesitated to get involved. Inside the house, David's behavior grew darker. He was controlling and unpredictable. Sarah noticed how he would explode in anger over small things. The children's toys, left out of place, a meal not cooked right, or a missed phone call. Sometimes his rage was silent but terrifying, filling the room with an invisible weight. Sarah began locking herself and the kids in their rooms at night, hoping to keep them safe. But David always found a way to remind them he was in charge. Jason parked a few blocks away and watched through the shadows. Emily stepped out of her car, looking cautious and nervous. She entered the building and moments later was joined by the businessman from the TV show. But she wasn't alone. Several other men appeared, exchanging briefcases filled with cash and documents. The meeting seemed secretive and tense, a far cry from the glamorous life Emily projected online. Jason's breath caught as he realized that Emily's affair was just the surface of a much bigger picture. She wasn't simply cheating, she was involved in something illegal and dangerous. The money exchanges, secret meetings, and hidden alliances painted a dark portrait of a life he had never imagined. Suddenly, a noise behind him made Jason freeze. A figure stepped out from the shadows and grabbed his arm. Before Jason could react, he was pulled toward the warehouse entrance, and Emily's eyes locked onto his. The shock on her face was mirrored by the panic rising in Jason's chest. Their secret was exposed, and neither could escape the consequences now. In that tense moment, Jason understood how deep the danger ran. What began as personal betrayal had become a perilous game involving criminal activity, lies, and threats. The choices he would make next could change everything: his marriage, his freedom, and possibly his life. The peaceful world he once knew was gone, replaced by a dark reality where trust was broken and survival was uncertain. Jason's heart pounded as Emily's eyes met his in the dim light of the warehouse. The tension between them was electric, charged with fear, anger, and disbelief. He had never imagined that following her would lead to this moment, standing face to face with the woman he thought he knew, caught in the middle of something dangerous and illegal. The other men quickly noticed Jason's presence, their expressions shifting from surprise to suspicion. The businessman, cold and calculating, stepped forward, assessing the situation with a quiet menace. Jason felt trapped, his mind racing as he struggled to find a way out. He wanted to ask Emily why she had hidden all this from him, why she was involved with these men. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, the reality of the moment hit him. This was no longer just about betrayal or heartbreak. This was a serious crime, and he was in the middle of it. As the men exchanged glances, Jason realized that any sudden movement could put him in danger. He slowly backed away, but one of the men blocked his path. The businessman's voice was cold and firm as he warned Jason to stay out of their affairs. The threat was clear. Any interference would have consequences. Jason's blood ran cold. He had uncovered a secret far bigger and darker than an affair, and now his life was at risk. Overwhelmed by shock and fear, Jason left the warehouse that night feeling more lost than ever. He knew he couldn't go to the police without proof. And even if he did, the businessman's reach was long and dangerous. The man was powerful, with connections that could silence anyone who spoke out. Jason was trapped between protecting himself and exposing the truth. Days passed in a blur of confusion. Emily became even more distant and secretive. She stopped, answering his questions, and avoided his gaze. Jason's anger boiled beneath the surface, but so did his pain. The woman he loved had not only betrayed him, but dragged him into a world of crime and deceit. He wondered how much she had truly cared, or if it had all been a lie from the start. One evening, Jason found himself alone in their living room, staring at the photos on the walls, their wedding pictures, happy moments frozen in time. It was hard to believe this was the same woman who now hid dangerous secrets. In that moment, a wave of despair mixed with rage overwhelmed him. He reached for the gun he kept locked in a drawer, a symbol of protection he had never imagined, using against the person he loved. When Emily returned home later that night, Jason confronted her with the harsh reality of what he had discovered. His voice was steady, but filled with pain. Emily, cornered and desperate, tried to explain, but Jason's trust was shattered. The tension escalated quickly, emotions spiraling out of control. In a moment of blind fury and heartbreak, Jason pulled out the gun. The room fell silent except for the echo of a single shot. The aftermath was devastating. Emily lay lifeless, on the floor, the weight of their broken lives pressing down on Jason. The man who had once believed in love and trust was now facing the irreversible consequences of betrayal and rage. Jason called the police himself, knowing there was no turning. Blackout. As officers arrived and took control of the scene, Jason's world crumbled around him. The quiet suburban life was shattered, replaced by flashing cameras, questions, and judgment. The story that had started as a private nightmare was now a public tragedy, one that would haunt the community for years to come. But even in the darkest moments, the truth remained tangled in secrets, and the full story was yet to unfold. The shooting shocked the quiet neighborhood to its core. News of Emily's death spread quickly, turning Jason from a grieving husband into a suspect in a high-profile murder case. Police arrived at the scene minutes after the fatal shot was fired, and Jason was taken into custody without resistance. The community struggled to understand how a couple who seemed so perfect could end in such tragedy. Media outlets picked up the story, broadcasting every detail and speculation, feeding public fascination and judgment alike. Jason's arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful journey through the legal system. The prosecution painted him as a jealous husband who lost control after discovering his wife's affair, while the defense argued that Jason was a broken man, driven to the edge by betrayal and fear. But behind the courtroom drama, there was more to the story, hidden truths that would soon come to light and change everything. During the investigation, police officers searched Emily's belongings thoroughly, uncovering a locked phone she had kept secret from Jason. When the authorities finally accessed it, they discovered a series of voice recordings Emily had made. These recordings were shocking. Emily had been gathering evidence against the businessman she had been involved with, planning to expose his criminal activities to the authorities. She detailed illegal money transfers, threats against her life, and her growing fear that the man's power extended far beyond what anyone suspected. The recordings revealed that Emily was not just a victim of her own mistakes, but had been trying to break free from a dangerous world she had become entangled in. She spoke of a plan to go to the police, to finally bring the truth into the light. This revelation shifted public opinion and complicated Jason's case. Instead of being seen solely as a jealous husband, he was now a man caught in a web of crime and betrayal, struggling with impossible choices. The businessman was soon arrested after the police used Emily's recordings as evidence. His empire began to crumble under the weight of accusations, and investigations uncovered a network of illegal activities involving bribery, money laundering, and intimidation. The truth about Emily's involvement, while complicated, painted her as both a wronged wife and a whistleblower, risking everything to expose a criminal enterprise. Jason's trial became a tense battle between justice and sympathy. His defense team argued that Jason acted in a moment of extreme emotional distress, overwhelmed by the shock of discovering not only his wife's affair, but her involvement in something far darker. The prosecution insisted that taking a life could not be excused, no matter the circumstances. As the trial unfolded, the community grappled with mixed feelings. Some saw Jason as a tragic figure destroyed by betrayal, while others believed he had crossed a line that should never be forgiven. The story served as a powerful reminder of how secrets, lies, and hidden dangers can destroy even the most ordinary lives. In the end, the court's decision would determine not just Jason's fate, but how the public understood the complicated, painful story behind the headlines. It was a chilling tale of love, betrayal, danger, and the devastating consequences when trust is shattered. The perfect life Jason and Emily had built was gone, replaced by a legacy of heartbreak and unanswered questions that would haunt everyone involved for years to come.